What happens if you take a terrible developer and an iconic franchise and throw it at the Nintendo DS? Well, you get Need for Speed Most Wanted DS. That's what you get. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the series where you guys suggest different terrible racing games for me to play, and at the end, we rank them. And today we are looking at the DS port of Need for Speed Most Wanted. Now, I opened this series with the PSP port of Most Wanted 510, and then I was flooded with comments telling me that the DS version is worse. And you know what? Fair play, guys, because you were absolutely correct. This is definitely worse. So this version of Most Wanted, released in November 2005, was of course again published by EA, and this time was developed by Sensory Sweep Studios. The developer behind such iconic titles as Alvin and the Chipmunks, Jackass the Game, My Spanish Coach, and Major League Eating the Game. Definitely fills me with confidence for this one. So to start off with, the game gets you to create a driving license, so my full official government name is EndMe, and my signature is a sad face, which perfectly summarizes my experience with this game. And from there, it's time to choose my first car. So we went with the Chevrolet Cobalt SS, and it actually looks okay on this menu here, until you get in the game. So I jumped straight into career mode to see what this fantastic part of Need for Speed history had to offer. And the answer was not very much. So before I break down what the career mode actually features, let's talk about the handling of the cars in this game. Oh boy. Last week I played Burnout Legends and boldly claimed that this could be the worst racing game on the DS. But here we have a very, very strong contender. So the controls are as follows. You hold A to accelerate, you steer with the D-pad, and then B and the right bumper act as your handbrake. There doesn't really appear to be a normal brake, because why would there be? Then you can look behind you using the left bumper, and that's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, with controls as simple as that, the game just has to be easy, right guys? Right? No, the handling is just oversensitive. Genuinely, the smallest tap of the D-pad can cause you to just turn and swerve into a wall. Much like Burnout Legends on DS, this game also suffers with ridiculous collision detection. Not quite as bad as Burnout did, but it's still quite apparent in this game. So now we've laid the groundwork for what a fun experience I'm about to have, let's go through what the career mode actually has to offer. Now, before we go any further, if you're a fan of racing games, or, well, terrible racing games, then hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications for future entries in the Worst Racing Games series. Anyway, moving on. So if I were a game developer, which for the record I'm not, but if I were, then I'd want to make the opening of my game exciting, attention-grabbing, fun, literally anything else. But the absolute legends at Sensory Sweep Studios decided to have the first mission of the career mode be a time trial. And not just a 1-lap time trial, no, a 2-lap time trial. So you get to spend twice as long on a terrible track. So yeah, there are 2 types of time trials in the career mode. You've got your standard 1-lap time trials, and then just to really wind you up and drag the game out, you've also got 2-lap time trials. These vary in difficulty depending on the level of traffic and the level of police activity, but for the most part these time trials are absolutely fine, and your biggest challenge will always be fighting the game itself with the handling of your car. So moving on, next up there are 3 different types of races in this game. So there are your standard circuit races, which can be 3 or 4 laps, and again can vary in difficulty depending on the volume of traffic and the volume of police activity. And this is also where you'll get your first taste of the AI races, and honestly, they're not terrible. They're certainly not the worst racers I've faced in a DS handheld racing game, but they're also not particularly good either. The biggest issue, to be honest, is how they can slow you down at the start of the race. Because of how poor the collision detection is, even if you are inches behind your opponent in front, you will bounce off them and slow right down, and this happens quite frequently and can make overtaking a nightmare because you have to leave quite a big gap. See, now this problem wouldn't be quite as bad if you weren't already fighting against the car itself that you're driving. Anyway, on top of circuit racing, you've also got the eliminator race, which is always quite a decent game mode, and is still the same here. It's just circuit racing, but at the end of each lap, someone gets eliminated. Now again, this would be more fun, but the problem is, if you make one mistake, which you're very likely to do with the game you're playing, then there's basically next to no chance of catching up. That's it, you may as well just restart. The third of these racing game modes is the point-to-point racing, and these are the shortest and honestly the most fun out of the three. It's a quick burst race where you go around a part of the track and it's the first to the finish line. I think honestly it's the most fun just purely because it's the shortest, but still kind of fun nonetheless. And last of all, we have Barricade. And no, I'm not talking about that cool Decepticon from Transformers. I'm talking about a police game mode. This is, by a landslide, the worst game mode in Most Wanted DS. You have to race through a section of the track as kind of a time trial, but there's a bunch of police barricades with various ways to pass through them, scattered over the track. Now, two things make this game mode particularly frustrating, and that is the poor handling of the cars and the terrible collision detection. There are quite a few times I reached the final checkpoint on one of these barricade modes, and I definitely didn't hit the police car, but it just goes busted and tells me it's over and I have to restart. On top of this, some of the barricades are unfairly placed on corners, and it's very hard to get through them in a decent amount of time because you have to slow right down to pass through because you can't risk sliding around on a corner. And that's basically everything the career mode has to offer. To be honest, on paper it's quite a nice little varied lineup, but the career mode itself throughout every single chapter has an over-reliance on time trials. If this wasn't a game about street racing, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but this entire game is about illegal street racing and police chases, and the main game mode that they keep presenting you with is time trial or multi-lap time trial. Why? Probably because it's the only time the game f***ing works properly. So in terms of gameplay, yeah, Need for Speed Most Wanted DS isn't that good. But how is it in terms of design? Spoiler alert, obviously it's bad. So, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the game really lulls you into a false sense of security at the start. It shows you some semi-decent models of some cars, you pick one, and then when you get into the game, oh damn, yeah, it's not pretty. So in-game when you're racing, the car models are absolutely horrendous. In fact, it's very strange because the pedestrians driving about just as part of the level genuinely look better than the cars you're racing in and against. At one point I looked down at the bottom screen to see it saying that my opponent was driving a Golf, to which I looked up and thought, how in any way, shape or form does this car resemble a Golf? It just looks like we handed a toddler a piece of paper and said, draw a car. Even for a 2005 DS game, this looks rough. Burnout Legends looks better than this did. And that came out a couple of months beforehand. On top of the ugly car models, the actual backgrounds that you're racing against also look horrible. The track designs are terrible, the visuals are terrible. Just overall, this is a very unattractive game. I would compare it to that of a PS1 title, but then I feel like I'd be insulting the PS1, so what's the point? Now, every version of Most Wanted except the DS and GBA versions had licensed soundtracks, and those games really benefited from that. The DS version, on the other hand, has an original soundtrack that just doesn't sound very good. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard, don't get me wrong, but it's just painfully mediocre. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting a masterpiece, but surely they could have done something a bit more stimulating on the ears than this. Anyway, before I talk about the response to Most Wanted DS, we do just have to talk a little bit more about the developer of this game, Sensory Sweep Studios. Because oh boy, there's a story here that's honestly more interesting than the game itself. So a couple of years after Most Wanted released, it would come to light that Sensory Sweep and its founder, Dave Rushton, were being taken to court. It turns out that developers working for Sensory Sweep were owed over $2 million in wages. This would not get resolved until October of 2012, where Dave Rushton was jailed for 12 months and ordered to pay just $1.2 million. On top of this, however, he'd already been in trouble previously for failing to pay taxes and for accounts of racketeering. So if I had to guess as to why this version of Most Wanted and a lot of other sensory sweep games were as bad as they were, it's because their founder was channeling the funds meant for the game elsewhere. Anyway, I have no idea what Mr. Rushton's up to these days, but hopefully he's staying well away from video game development. So after all the chaos surrounding Need for Speed Most Wanted DS, what was the actual reaction to it? Well, not great. The game holds a very sad 45 out of 100 on Metacritic, with the highest review score being 60 from Nintendo Power, where they've said, solid, but it could have been so much more. Which I wholeheartedly disagree with the solid part. For once, however, I do actually agree with what IGN had to say about it. The game just doesn't gel at all, control is bad, objectives are confusing, and the visuals don't come anywhere near what EA did with the previous DS Need for Speed game. So yeah, not great. For context, the PSP version of this game, which I opened this series with, held about 70 out of 100. Now, how would Most Wanted go on to sell? So for context, the very average PSP port sold over 2 million copies, and collectively across all the home console variants, we had over 15 million copies sold. The DS version, however, sold 250,000. So not fantastic. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's certainly not great either. Just for reference, these sale figures are from VG charts. So now the time has come to rank this game. There's no other spot on this tier list other than pure evil for this game. When I first started playing, I was thinking this could be a so bad it's good, but the further I got into the game, the more I started to dislike it. I would argue that Most Wanted DS is as bad as, if not worse than Burnout Legends DS, so it's got to stay in the bottom tier. So what did you guys think of Most Wanted DS? Were you a fan of it growing up? Did you dislike it as much as I did? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, just to discuss how I'm picking these games, up until this video I had just been putting them through a randomizer from all your comments and suggestions, but because I had such an overwhelmingly large amount of people tell me to play Most Wanted DS, I feel like I had to do it. So, moving forward again, it will just be randomly selected. So again, let me know what you want me to play below. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.